Do you think that Spanish has had an impact on the way people speak English in Miami?
Well, yes, because of, I think the way they speak, like dialect-wise, makes them I want to reiterate dialects, because dialect, when you learn another language, you could switch between speaking English and speaking Spanish, for example.
Right.
And normally when you know somebody that speaks Spanish, they sound like they have an accent to them. And when somebody speaks English, they don't necessarily have an accent. But I'm from New York, so coming from New York to Florida, we're completely different things. And hearing stuff in New York and the way they speak, they're very straightforward, broad, direct, and they articulate words, but sometimes depending on the culture. And then when you come to Florida, everybody seems to speak with this, like, the Spanish accent.
Have you had any encounters where people are like, oh, you have to speak Spanish because, like, everybody here speaks Spanish, or you have to speak English because we live in America, or that's the standard?
Yeah. I mean, I've encountered people like that. They're like, oh, you live in America, but as they know, America is like a huge melting pot. So like, especially here in Miami and places like New Mexico, Arizona, California, like they all speak Spanish. Like the majority of the people speak Spanish. So you have to, the best thing to do is adapt, because it's not only going to benefit you, but benefit people around you.
Do you think Miami has an accent?
Yes, definitely. A lot of my friends told me that I had an accent moving down here.
Is it just in the tone of voice or in the choice of words that you use?
Both. I can say like the tone of voice, like you can tell like when somebody's from Miami because they have a distinct like tone, but also like what you choose to say, and sometimes words do get confusing because it does like get lost in translation, because you're like, oh, maybe I should say that in Spanish, but I should say it in English, so like everything gets jumbled up.
Pero like...
Exactly.
That's a typical Spanish thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's from Miami?
Yes, that is pretty... That is a common Miami thing. I try not to use it. Especially sometimes you write essays and then it gets really confusing. When you write it, you're like, no, that doesn't make sense.
Do you sometimes find yourself using Spanish in the essays you write?
Yes.
How do you think Spanish has impacted the way we use English in Miami?
I just think that Spanish really has impacted the way we use English in Miami, just from kind of the speed in which people speak Spanish is a lot quicker. So in Miami, we naturally speak Spanish way quicker, and a lot of the words, like the inflections and like where you put the emphasis and like which syllable and stuff completely changes because of the influence of Spanish. And then you have Spanglish, so there's some things that people would say and they don't even know that it's Spanish, but it's just because of living in Miami that they've grown to say.
Do you think it's a good or bad impact?
I think it's kind of indifferent, because throughout history, like the whole globalization and technology and life, and if you look back, the English that we spoke 20 years from now, 20 years ago, 100 years ago, it's different. Like it's evolution, and not evolution, but like change, and just time changes. It's not necessarily a negative thing, but it's not necessarily a good thing. It's just kind of indifferent.
What are your views on how Spanish and English are used in Miami?
Well, I think the situation of the two languages here in Miami is a good example of what linguists call diglossia. On the one hand, in my experience after living here for 11 years, is that most people I come across in the street speak Spanish. Actually, since I am a Spanish speaker and I have a Spanish accent, even when I speak in English often, the responses are in Spanish. On the other hand, if you go to school, if you go to college, or if you go to the administration, the official language is English, and which leads to the situation, to the current situation that we have. A majority of population who have Spanish as a native language, but on the other hand have to use English for official purposes.